In a blind taste test, I said that this bottle of Old Forester was a pretty good entry-level bourbon. But how right was I? Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, today I'm taking a look at Old Forester's 86, their entry-level bourbon, and is one that is now available in the UK supermarket. Now, to be fair, it has been available in the UK supermarket for a couple of years now, mainly in Tesco, but I've only recently got round to getting a bottle, and by recently, I mean in the last 6 to 8 months, but I've been pretty lazy on getting it started. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that this actually is an open bottle because I use this in a blind taste test amongst a load of other entry-level supermarket bourbons to work out which of those was the best, despite never having tried this before. So it was a little bit of a red herring in that mix, and as it happens, this Old Forester came pretty much bang in the middle. It was a very good entry-level bourbon, and it came up actually next to Buffalo Trace, which is one that I often recommend to people all the time. So today we're going to give it a try on its own and work out what I really think about it. Just before we break into it though, what is it? Well, it's from Old Forester. It is their 86 proof, and that is really all it is called. Straight bourbon whiskey. Interestingly, one of the few who spell it the Scotch way. If you take a look at the label there, straight bourbon whiskey without an E. Nice lovely textured label on this as well, and it is from the Brown-Forman company, and if you're thinking that kind of sounds a bit familiar but you're not sure why, they are the people that own Jack Daniels, which, whilst not absolutely a bourbon but kind of is one of the biggest in the game, if not the biggest actually in the game. So yeah, they've got some history somewhere lurking that suggests they know what they're doing, even if the entry-level Jack Daniels isn't really to everyone's taste. The mash bill on this particular bottle though is 72% corn, 18% rye and 10% malted barley, which makes it, well, pretty much down the middle, ironically, as I voted it, for bourbon mash bills. It really is just about as generic as you're going to get. This particular blend was first made in 1870, making it over 150 years old, and now I'll be totally honest, I've run out of facts about this bottle, so let's get pouring. Sadly, no cork pop on this because it is a screw cap, but we've come to expect it on cheaper bottles. It's okay. It's a bit disappointing and actually keeps the whiskey better than a cork would, but it's not as fun, and that is what I'm complaining about. So let's get a drop poured. Oh, and if you were wondering how strong it is, if the 86 on the bottle wasn't enough of a clue, also on the cap there, 86 proof, which of course is 43%. So in the glass, it is your normal, everyday kind of golden syrup hued bourbonness. It's exactly what we'd expect, nothing out of the ordinary there. It's pretty clear, has to be said. A little bit of bits floating around in there, but really not much at all. Nice legs on the glass actually. Let me give it a swirl around and put it up to the camera if that will focus. For an entry level, it's leaving some legs behind it. Not brilliant, but not bad by any means. Right then, aroma time. The thing that hits you immediately on this is that fairly generic kind of sweet floral note. I'm going to say it again. Honey, it's like floral honey. So many things smell like that these days. It's just something that gets into almost every review that I do, but it is what I'm smelling. But it's backed up by this incredible sinus clearing menthol minty polo mint freshness, which is a bit of an oddity in whiskey. It does show itself from time to time, but it's certainly not in every bottle, and certainly not in many bottles at this kind of, well, point in the market, the entry-level stuff. It's, oh yeah, delightfully refreshing. The ethanol picks up with it and kind of adds to that real sinus clearing sensation. You've got your generic sweet vanilla notes, and there's something just a little bit damp and fusty right on the back of there. It's yeah, dried mulchy leaves kind of thing. It's, yeah, just a bit vegetal, I guess is the best way to describe it, but it smells different, but in general pretty nice. Well then, I've not tried this since doing that blind taste test, so this will be interesting. Let's give it a go. Cheers. Ooh, that is good. That is good. Now, I'll be honest, when I did that blind taste test, a lot of people in the comments came at me and said, you've kind of done this wrong because you knew what was going into it, or at least you were trying to work out what was what, and actually you ended up picking just the ABV order in general. So, okay, fine. And now I'm starting to agree with them because that feels really, really good indeed for a 43% 86 proof bourbon. That is very, very interesting. It's got a few layers, that freshness from the mint, from the, yeah, just that sinus cleansing thing we talked about on the aroma, that continues. It's a little bit more, I guess, approachable in the flavour. It's a bit more like zesty orange peel kind of a thing. There's still a hint of the mint in there somewhere, but it's much more kind of fruit freshness than it is just raw mint. Other than that though, it's got your typical bourbon, fudgy, vanilla note. It's not too cloying, it's not too sticky. It feels quite thin, but actually, in terms of the flavours that are in here, I don't think it's a particularly bad thing. It is a bit more easygoing, it is a bit lighter. It's a fantastic warm weather summer sipper, this one. And whilst there might not be a million and one other flavours in here, it's feeling a bit like you can taste a lot of the raw ingredients. A bit of the spice comes in from the rye, a bit of sweetness from the corn. You're getting some actual oaky barrel notes. It's not big, it's not, you know, bitter oak, it's not aggressively oaky, but there are just a few tips of the hat in there to the kind of base makeup of the liquid itself, and there is a bit of a charm to that. On the finish then, dry, zingy, tangy, bit more citrus peel, sweet but dry, but again, pretty well balanced. I'm amazed that that didn't come higher up. Now, in that blind test, Maker's Mark won it, which I was very surprised by, but it was the highest proof, so maybe that was helping its case just a little bit. But this came up right next to the UK version of Buffalo Trace. The UK version, remember, being 40% or 80 proof, not the 45% 90 proof that you get in the US, so it's not as good as the US version. But I might just be tempted to pop it up against this once again right now to see how I feel when I know about what they are side by side, especially because, well, in terms of an approach, they are pretty similar. Buffalo Trace is pretty down the middle. The mash bills, I can't remember quite how similar they are, but they certainly aren't a million miles apart. And, well, yeah, I think it'll be an interesting test. Let's get a glass. Right then, very little left in this particular bottle of Buffalo Trace. I'm going to say it again because every time I do a video featuring Buffalo Trace, the comments are flooded with, it's 45%, not 40%. It really is 40% in the UK. I'm sorry, it just is. There you go. Bit of proof there for you. But let's give this a go side by side. Now, this does have a cork top. So I want to taste it just to see how close they really are, given how I rated them in that blind tasting. Quick water break to cleanse the palate. Visually, they are really, really similar. The Old Forester is actually a touch darker, richer colour, but otherwise, yeah, pretty much level pegging. Aroma-wise, well, Old Forester really is leaning into the fact that it's a bit fresher, it's a bit more spritzy, zesty, a bit less, I guess, bold and rugged, and I'm kind of loving it for it. It's definitely not trying to hide that. Buffalo Trace, on the meanwhile, actually very different on the aroma. Comparatively feels quite leathery, even though it's not a note I would normally pick out on Buffalo Trace on its own. Much more richness, much more dark vanilla, fudge, almost cinder toffee vibes. It has got a nice bit of its own kind of orange zest thing, but it delivers very differently, and it almost feels like an old-fashioned where you've already got your other ingredients in there, does Buffalo Trace. It's big, rich, dark sugar, orange zest, vanilla. But yeah, nice enough. Anyway, cheers. Yeah, see, this is interesting. In comparison to all the other things I was reviewing, I thought these two felt pretty similar on taste, but side by side, not the case. The Buffalo is much more barrel focused, it's more about those richer, darker notes, it's much more sugary, it's much sweeter, but also more bitter, more depthy, and now I'm really torn. The rye definitely shows itself more in the Old Forester, which is probably why it's appealing to me, because I do like a rye heavy bourbon, even though what was it, 18%? It's high-ish, but it's not particularly high. Yeah, I like that spice profile, but I'm going to be really hard-pressed to say that it's better than Buffalo Trace. There's something about that dark broodingness of the Buffalo Trace. Again, comparatively, compared to some things, this is light, spritzy and airy. You know, it's all about comparison and relativity. And the good news is, it's pretty easy just to have both of these on your shelves, because they both serve a similar but important different purpose, which is they are both suited to a beginner palate. They are both suited to the, you know, the more proficient bourbon drinker, but you know, when you don't want to drink your best stuff. They're both still very good and very interesting, but one may be suited to the colder nights and the other's definitely more a summertime sipper for me. But they're both pretty affordable. Both in the UK are at most 25 quid a bottle, often quite a bit less, and as a result, yeah, no reason not to have one of each. And I, for one, am very glad I've got both, which is something I'm starting to say quite a lot, I feel like, in these videos, but it is the absolute truth. The Old Forester is fantastic, but it is a little bit more leaning into that fresh, spritzy, zesty realm, which, well, let me put it this way. If you don't like bullet bourbon, then you might not prefer Old Forester to Buffalo Trace. It's not as intense, it's not as big on those rye notes, it's not as just, yeah, that thing onto its own that Bullet seems to be. But just be aware that if you like Bullet but you think it's a bit too much, this will be a great shout. If you don't like it at all, maybe it's not for you. That would be the way that I'd sit that. But yeah, I think that's really all I've got to say about it. Have you tried either of these? Let me know please in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, that really is everything. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe if you'll be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.